The Capitals pick up a big win in game number 4 in Montreal and are now just one win away from moving on to the second round.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, the Capitals did it. They found a way to pick up a big win in Montreal in a game that in the second period in particular, it did appear that the Habs were going to skate away into victory lane. How did the Capitals turn it around? I'll talk about that a bit later. Logan Thompson. Yes, Logan Thompson was huge for the Capitals in this game. And to be honest with you, I was surprised he was in the game, period, considering what we saw in game 3. What did Logan mean for the Capitals? Then I'll talk about the third period turnaround. Like I talked about, it was not a lot of activity in the first period, but in the second period, the Habs took it to the Capitals. How did the Caps turn it around in the third period? But just to get it going here, it feels good that the Capitals found a way to win game number 4. And again, you know, if you are the kind of person that's into vibes, if you're into a vibe check, well, the vibe check in the second period was not going too well for the Capitals. The Bell Center was rocking, and the special teams for the Capitals was not rocking. And, it did appear that the Habs were going to just skate away into victory lane just based on the momentum, that their passes were much more crisp and they back check very well. And it did feel in just a lot of ways like the Canadiens were going to even up this series and make it that much more difficult for the Capitals to win this whole thing. Because let's be honest here, going into this series, if you're talking about just favorites alone, of course, the Capitals were the favorites to win this series. But, if you talk to a lot of people or listen to a lot of different sources, myself included, I thought it was kind of a coin flip. So for the Capitals to gain some momentum and to win a game on the road of all places, Montreal, was absolutely huge. So how did they get it done? Let's talk about game number 4 and just a true momentum builder for this team. A big moment, and that's what we're going to talk about, pulling off that 5-2 victory to take a commanding 3-1 lead in this series. So just a huge moment for the Capitals to do that, to find a way to win in a game, like I said, was so difficult. But, Dylan Strome, who has been huge for the Capitals all season long, continued to be just that. He was the one that set the ball in motion for the Capitals, and he's kind of had that role all season for the Capitals, and tonight was no difference. And it was assisted by who else? None other than Anthony Beauvillier. And, you take a look at it. Anthony Beauvillier has been huge for the Capitals. That was the only move that the Capitals made on the trade deadline. And, the perception was that he was going to be a depth player. Maybe he'll play in the third line, or maybe he'll just be one of those, healthy scratches that sits up in the press box. Has been huge. And the big thing about all of that is that he's been huge in Alexei Protas's absence. So just huge what Anthony Beauvillier and Dylan Strome have put up. It's worth noting that Beauvillier made history as the first Capitals player in Capitals history to record an assist in each of his first 4 playoff games what an impressive feat he has been able to pull off. And, you take a look at Anthony Beauvillier. I was a bit concerned seeing him out on the ice, as he is not one of the bigger players out on the ice, and I thought that he would be prone to being injured. But he plays it well. He keeps his head on a swivel, and he doesn't go after the puck blindly into the boards there. He doesn't chase it down, and he understands the lay of the land. But you take a look at it, that first line for the Capitals in particular, I'm talking Strome, and I'm talking Beauvillier, combining for a whopping 16 points in just 4 playoff games. So quite stunning what Strome and Beauvillier have been able to put up. And, you take a look at the scoring in this game, and I'm talking vibes. And I don't really like to, I like more solid stats. I don't like to look at vibes, but, you take a look at it. Like I said, the first period was nothing. Dylan Strome started it all in the second period, and then the pushback from the Habs. Uri Slafkovsky scores, Cole Caulfield scored, and Bell Center was rocking. That was, as a Capitals fan, when I was concerned, because, oftentimes, fan noise does factor in, but it is especially true in Montreal, as it was loud. They had that decibel meter, and I want to say it was 100 decibels or something of that nature to start off the game. So very loud, and hard for the Capitals to get any footing. But you take a look at shots on goal in the first period, the Caps outshot Montreal 6-5. The second period, they outshot Montreal 11-4. But one of the things that we noticed in this game, and one of the things that was supposed to be the strong suit of the Capitals, was the physicality. But to be clear here, in this series, I guess, we saw Carrier get knocked out, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, or at least out for the game. I guess I don't know his long-term status, but, Josh Anderson, the insertion of Arbor Xhekaj, that, if we're not just looking at hits, but we're just talking about physicality in general, if I'm going to paint it with a broad brush, I think seems to favor the Canadiens. And it's been difficult, as the Capitals have got drawn into penalties for this or that. To be clear here, I'm not trying to say the Capitals haven't had a physical game, but the perception going into this series was that it was just going to be the Capitals steamrolling the Habs as far as the physical front is concerned. But that was not the case. All things considered, for the Capitals and the Habs, the Capitals outshot the Habs 26-18. So quite a showing from this team in a game that in a lot of ways I felt like they needed to win. Because, like I say, if the Habs if they found a way to even up this series, then I think that going back to Washington on Wednesday, it could have gone in any other direction. We don't know that the Habs could have been riding a high off that big win. But the good thing is the Capitals did find a way to win a game on the road, and, against great odds, I guess I'm going to say, as Cole Caulfield and, Suzuki and Slafkovsky, these kind of guys are just really dialed in, and a formidable Habs team, that is young and scrappy. And listen, the Capitals aren't out of the woods yet. They found a way to pick up a big win in a game that I really felt like they needed to win. And I think that is the momentum that they're going to need to close it out potentially on Wednesday. That is our hope. Anyway, all right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about how it all changed. The third period turnaround. Now you listen, the Habs are, generally speaking, a strong team in the first and third period, and I knew that the Habs, at least historically, like to throw the kitchen sink at their opponent. How did the Capitals find a way to take that sink and throw it back into the Habs' face? I'll discuss straight ahead. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at AnCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So the Caps picking up a huge 5-2 victory over the Habs. A big win for the Capitals. And who deserves a shout out in this show? I'm going to go ahead and say Brandon Duhaime, 2 goals in the game, 2 points, 3 shots on goal, and a bit of a bounce back from not a stellar game 3, shall we say. Brandon Duhaime, that has a lot of tools in his tool set, physicality, a leader, a good goal scorer, and has been absolutely huge for this team. And one of the players that was instrumental in the Capitals coming back, in particular in the third period. So let's dive into that. In the second segment of the show is, how did the Capitals stage the unthinkable? How did they find a way to turn it around in a game that, to be honest with you here, I don't want revisionist thinking here. In the second period, as Capitals fans, how concerned were with how the Capitals were playing? You saw Strome put up a goal, but then all of a sudden the Habs score 1 and 2 goals and have the 2-1 advantage. It was difficult, and I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if you're going to be honest with me. I was concerned. So in the third period, with the game tied at 2-2, there was a lot of questions. And were the Capitals going to be able to find a way to turn it around? Like I said, Strome scoring 1 and Slafkovsky and Caulfield scoring 2 in the second period. But Brandon Duhaime, Mangiapane, Duhaime, Wilson, the big guns for the Capitals, at least in this game in particular. I'm going to go ahead and say in this game in particular, as Mangiapane has not been the biggest goal scorer. But in this game, it's what have you done for me lately? And in this game, Mangi was huge. Duhaime and Tom Wilson bringing out the physicality at just the right time. And that's one of the things that was talked about in this game beforehand. Was Spencer Carberry was talking about that he's okay with Tom Wilson going out there and playing his game. He's just got to avoid the extra curricular activity. We're talking about in game 3 that when the period was over and all of a sudden Josh Anderson and Tom Wilson are going at it in the bench, that the league was really looking at that very closely, and they made a call to the Habs, they made a call to the Capitals, and said that wasn't going to happen. And all things considered, I think that Tom Wilson showed some restraint, saved the Carrier hit. And and one thing I'm going to say is there's quite a few Habs fans that are watching and listening to this, and I've interacted with quite a few of them, and I understand your perception that it appeared to be a bit dirty, but all things considered, Tom Wilson, took out Carrier, if you will, and that definitely pushed the momentum in the Capitals' favor. If it's right or wrong, it is what it is, and it pushed the momentum in the Capitals' favor. And, to be clear here, we've seen the Habs do that as well. Like I talked about, a team that wasn't supposed to be such a physical threat has been, and that was part of the secret ingredient. In fact, I'm going to say the biggest ingredient in the Capitals staging what I'm going to say an improbable third period comeback. So let's dive into that in this second segment here. Wilson really stepped up. Like I say, that leveling of Alexander Carrier to create space for Duhaime. But after a tough bout in the previous game with Josh Anderson, Wilson smartly played a more controlled game, an important adjustment. And of course, I'm going to hear it from the Habs fans that, Wilson was crazy out there, and maybe the Ovechkin hit was a bit dirty as well. But it is what it is. And I understand your position, as there were hits that, I saw the Habs made that I thought maybe weren't the cleanest as well. So, we knew it was going to be a physical series. We know that the Habs were the underdogs, the last team to qualify, the Capitals the first, a bit of a David and Goliath situation. But, at the end of the day, Goliath is going to Goliath, you feel me? And that is what happened in this game. Andrew Mangiapane, like I said, was a standout, calling his own number to deliver the GWG. And, it was a good feeling for Andrew Mangiapane to do that because he was getting shoved around quite a bit. And, I'm not a revisionist. I know what kind of player Mangiapane is. He's a chirper. He's a guy that gets into in extracurricular activities as well. But what I'm going to go ahead and say is it did appear that the Habs had circled Mangiapane to kind of like keep the physical guys on the team, Anderson and Xhekaj, these kind of guys, just keep him in your targets, as it did seem that he was on the short end of the stick, a lot like Nick Dowd in this game. But Mangiapane was huge. And like I said, Brandon Duhaime, who scored twice, including an empty netter to seal the deal. And, you take a look at Duhaime, all things considered, has been a great addition, in particular on the fourth line, primarily with the Capitals. And, huge. And, it's, nothing new. We talk about it all the time, the impact that, the fourth line has for the Capitals, a lot in the same way that the fourth line for the Habs has a big impact, but was huge for the Capitals tonight. So, like I say, it was a great thing. The Capitals were able to dig deep and find a way to win this game because, the pressure was on. You're playing in Montreal. It is a very loud place to play, and it is a place that their fan base is very enthusiastic about their team, shall we say. Again, it's a good thing the Capitals found a way to do it. It's good that Wilson, Duhaime, these kind of guys had to dig deep. I guess, what I'm going to say is it's a bit unfortunate that Carrier had to leave the game. I guess I don't know his long-term status, but what we know is that he left the game and that benefited the Capitals. So all things considered, looking at this from the Capitals' point of view, a nice 5-2 victory over the Habs. Let's hope that this team can keep it rolling, and let's hope they can close it out on Wednesday. When I took a look at this series, I knew that it wasn't going to be easy, and it has not been, despite the fact of what we see in the outcome here, that the Capitals are leading the series 3-1. That let's be honest here, Capitals fans, it definitely could have gone the other way, at least if you're just looking at the second period. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about Logan Thompson was in the game. Yes, can you believe it? Logan Thompson was in the game after that, what appeared to be a very serious injury to the back of his head and his lower leg. How is it even possible that we saw him out on the ice? I'll discuss straight ahead. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. Now, personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk on a road trip or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to snack. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So the unthinkable event in this game was that Logan Thompson was in net for the Capitals. There was a lot of talk out there that it could be Charlie Lindgren, just based on the fact of what we saw in the previous game, where he had to, Logan Thompson had to leave the game. The camera, either in the net or behind the net, showed him kind of clutching at the back of his leg. But then there was talk that, he had a bruise on the back of his head, hit the neck area. To see him in the net, I was very surprised. If you listened to yesterday's show, that I thought that was going to be a long shot. But what is one of the things that we noticed that he added to his gear was one of those neck danglers. You saw Braden Holtby always have that. And to be clear here, if you're out there, you're taking pucks, you're a netminder, you should utilize every possible measure that you can to stay safe, especially since Logan Thompson has had some upper body issues. That's what we know for sure is upper body issues. One could say that it's head issues. And so if you can give yourself any advantage, do that. So it's interesting as we dive into this third segment, the impact of the netminders for this team, for this series, rather. You take a look at it, the foregone conclusion was that it was going to be Logan Thompson, and on the other end, it was going to be Sam Montembeault. But what changed in game number 3 is that we saw Logan Thompson leave the game. We saw Sam Montembeault leave the game and insert Charlie Lindgren and Jakob into the game. And, Dobesh. So it's interesting that, the backup netminder for the Canadiens, if you will, I'm going to say backup as the perception is that it's Sam Montembeault, that he played pretty well. And you take a look at it, that it's a good thing that Logan Thompson was good to go, because I'm going to be honest with you here, a lot of question marks if it was going to be how the Capitals would fare with Charlie Lindgren in the net. Now, like I said, there's people that are in the camp for Charlie Lindgren. There's people in there that are in the camp for Logan Thompson. But, if you just want to take a look at the numbers alone, Logan Thompson gives the Capitals the best chance at winning night in and night out. It's not about, who's the nicer person or who's, does the better interview. I'm talking just statistically speaking, that Logan Thompson, one of the front runners for the Vezina, gives the Capitals the best chance, and was evidenced tonight as the Capitals leave the game in the win column. So let's talk about LT in the final segment of the show here. And you take a look at it. The Capitals, were outshot in this game, that it was a good thing that they had a guy like Logan Thompson between the pipes. And, you take a look at it. Like I said, there was questions about his health and what that would have meant for the team had he not been in the game, saving 16 of 18. And, to be clear here, he played a good game, an 889 save percentage. But watching this game, there were still some times that I thought that he was out of position. But, the one thing I will say about the Habs is that they are really good with those seam passes. As, Cole Caulfield in particular, it's almost somewhat from Alex Ovechkin's office that, the first couple go rounds there, the Capitals were not able to fend that off. That, that seam pass that they implemented was difficult for the Capitals defense, and more particular, the netminder to stop. But they found a way to do that, and that was due in large part because of Logan Thompson being huge in the net. And no real surprise, he has been that for the Capitals all season long, just being stellar in net. And, you take a look back on it, it was a move that was made last summer that was surprising. Of course, remember Darcy Kemper going out to the Kings, and the perception was that it was going to be Chucky and perhaps, Hunter Shepard or Clay Stevenson, something of that nature. But Brian McClellan was able to take a look at that, diagnose it, troubleshoot it, if you will, and go, Charlie Lindgren was really good last year, and the year before that was good in the month of December. Is that guy going to be able to take on the number one role? And Hunter Shepard and Clay Stevenson, let's be honest here, they're AHL netminders. We don't know what we have. He orchestrated a deal, Logan Thompson on the Capitals. So you had a Logan Thompson, Charlie Lindgren tandem, and has played out very well for the Capitals. A little bit of bumps in the road, all things considered. In the latter part of the season, Logan Thompson getting injured. Charlie Lindgren showed some inconsistency in different points of the season. But all things considered, that is the tandem that got us in this position. So Logan Thompson demonstrating tonight what makes him a great netminder, saving 16 of 18 shots. I don't think that you can really ask for a whole lot more than that. I guess a shutout would be what more we could ask from him. But all things considered, Logan Thompson, just surprising everyone, myself included, to see him out there. I know that we saw him at the morning skate, and it did all lean towards that he was going to be in the net. But huge for the Capitals tonight. And ultimately, I think what put the Capitals in the win column, because, I know we can't live in the woulda, shoulda, coulda, but I'm going to go ahead here and say that I do not think the Capitals would have won the game if Charlie Lindgren was in net. We'll never know. That's just something that's been rolling around in here, and that's my assessment. As far as things that need to get cleaned up, the special teams for the Capitals need some work. If we want to talk about that here briefly, talking about how, the Capitals found a way to rally, but the things that need to get cleaned up on the power play, going 0 for 5 on the power play, and the PK isn't any better. So definitely the special teams are something that needs to get worked on. And I know I just kind of beat this like a dead horse, that I've said this all season long, that, special teams, and if you've listened to this all season, I remember talking about this for the first time in the preseason, that the Capitals struggled with their special teams, that it's going to get drawn more into focus the later we get into the season. And well, what do you know? We're in the playoffs, and, the Capitals going 0 for 5 on the power play is not what the doctor ordered. It's a good thing that the Capitals found a way to dig deep, and that they found a way to get a goal from Strome that put the positivity in motion. Duhaime, Mangiapane, Wilson, these kind of guys. Otherwise, we would be thinking to ourselves, what if we would have made good on some of those power plays? All things that the Capitals need to work on. But at the end of the day, to summarize it, the Capitals played well. There's not going to be games in the playoffs. We just need to get over the fact that, 9 times out of 10, it's not a 3-0 victory, a 4-0, just a true shellacking, that it's two teams that are really good. That's why they're in the position that they're in. So the Capitals did find a way. I'm going to try to push as much of the negativity out of my head as possible, because at the end of the day, 5-2 victory, that's what we should concentrate on. Clean up the things that need to get cleaned up on, but the Capitals at the end of the day can put a W in the win column, and the Habs can put an L. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.